A settler woman left for dead discovers a new life and love with a mysterious tribal warrior. Alara's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps as she stumbled through the dense forest. The ground was uneven, roots and rocks threatening to trip her with every step. Her hands were scratched, her clothes torn, and the wound on her side throbbed with pain. She had thought she would die that day, alone on this alien world, abandoned by everyone she once called family. The attack had been sudden. Raiders from the neighboring settlement had struck at dawn, leaving smoke rising from the colony she had called home. Alara remembered the screams, the crack of blaster fire, and the desperate attempts of settlers to fight back. She had tried to help, but a raider's weapon had struck her chest, and everything had gone black. Now hours, or maybe days, later, she was alive, but only barely. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and thirst made her tongue dry and heavy. She had no choice but to move. Standing still meant death. The forest was alive with strange sounds, clicks and chirps from creatures she had never seen, wings rustling in the shadows, and the low hum of the planet itself, as if it watched her every move. She stumbled over a moss-covered root and fell to her knees. Her fingers dug into the soil, leaving dark streaks as she struggled to rise. Pain shot through her side, but she refused to lie down. She couldn't. Somewhere ahead, through the thick ferns and towering trees, there was hope, or, at least, survival. Wow! A sudden rustle to her left made her freeze. Heart hammering, she slowly raised her head. For a moment the forest seemed still. Then she saw it, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, watching her from the shadows. A predator? Perhaps. But before she could react, a massive shape lunged at her from the underbrush. Instinct took over. Alara rolled to the side just in time, barely avoiding the creature's snapping jaws. She scrambled backward, grasping a sturdy branch for balance. The animal hissed, claws digging into the earth, but then it stopped, sniffing the air. Its gaze flicked past her to something deeper in the forest. With a low growl, it turned and disappeared. Alara's chest heaved with relief. That had been too close. She sank to the ground, pressing her hand against the wound on her side. Blood soaked her fingers, and the sharp pain reminded her how weak she truly was. Survival on this planet wasn't just about avoiding raiders or predators. It was about outlasting the land itself. And so far, the land was winning. The sun, or what passed for the sun on this strange world, began to sink behind the jagged cliffs in the distance. Darkness crept through the forest like a living thing. Alara knew she had to find shelter before nightfall. Predators were more active after dark, and she couldn't fight them in her condition. She crawled toward a small clearing where the ground seemed drier, hoping to find a hollow or a fallen tree she could hide under. Then she heard it, a faint whistle, high and melodic, cutting through the hum of the forest. She froze. It wasn't an animal. The sound had a rhythm, deliberate and controlled. Almost, her heart raced. Could it be another settler? She tried to call out, her voice hoarse. "Hello? Anyone there?" No reply. Only the whistle came again, closer this time. She could feel eyes on her, watching, waiting. Fear surged through her veins, but curiosity nudged her forward. She inched toward the sound, every step careful, every movement deliberate. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. His skin was dark, patterned with intricate markings she had never seen before. His eyes were sharp and alert, observing her with a mix of caution and curiosity. He carried no obvious weapon, but the way he moved suggested he could strike with deadly precision if needed. Elara froze. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a whistle. Then, slowly, he crouched down a little, lowering his posture as if to show he meant no harm. He gestured toward her with one hand, then pointed to the dense forest behind her. The message was clear. Follow him, or remain where she was, and risk whatever lurked in the darkness. Pain twisted in her side, but she nodded. Carefully, she allowed herself to rise and followed him through the forest. He moved silently, his feet barely making a sound on the undergrowth. Elara stumbled a few times, but he would pause and glance back at her, his expression unreadable, yet patient. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing surrounded by towering trees whose trunks glowed faintly with bioluminescent moss. At the center was a small, natural hollow, just big enough to shield her from the elements. The man gestured for her to lie down. She obeyed, collapsing onto the soft ground, exhausted. He moved closer, examining her wound. She flinched, but he made a soft humming sound, almost like a chant. To her surprise, he reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a bundle of leaves. With deft hands, he crushed them into a paste and applied it gently to her wound. The pain dulled slightly, not entirely gone, but enough that she could breathe without wincing. You saved me," she managed to say, her voice trembling. The man tilted his head, almost as if considering her words. Then he simply nodded once and stepped back, giving her space. She realized then that she had no idea what language he spoke, or if he even spoke one at all. Yet somehow, through gestures, sounds, and actions, he had communicated more than words ever could. As night fell, the forest around them came alive. Strange insects glowed in the dark, casting flickering lights across the clearing. The sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air, some melodic, some eerie. Elara tried to sleep, but her mind raced. Who was this man? Why had he saved her? And what did it mean for her future on this unforgiving planet? In the quiet hours before dawn, she heard him moving outside the hollow, keeping watch. She realized that for the first time since the attack, she felt a spark of hope. She was not alone. And maybe, just maybe, survival was possible. When the first light of the alien sun crept through the trees, painting the forest in soft gold, Elara opened her eyes. The man was still there, sitting silently nearby, watching the horizon. She studied him, trying to memorize every detail, the sharp lines of his face, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the intensity of his gaze. For reasons she couldn't explain, a sense of trust began to form. He had saved her life. He had shown patience when she was weak, and though they could not speak, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, fragile but real. Elara knew she couldn't stay in the hollow forever. She needed food, water, and knowledge of the land if she wanted to survive. But she also realized that she had an ally, perhaps the first one she had found since the colony fell. This mysterious warrior, stranger and alien as he was, might be the key to a life she had thought lost forever. The day stretched ahead, and with it, new challenges. Predators, harsh terrain, and the ever-present danger of the raiders would test her limits. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Elara felt a spark of determination. She would survive. She would endure. And perhaps in this strange, wild world, she might even find something more: friendship, trust, and the beginnings of a bond she could not yet name. As she rose unsteadily, brushing dirt and leaves from her torn clothes, the warrior, Kale, she silently decided to call him, stood and gestured toward a narrow path leading deeper into the forest. Without words, he invited her to follow. Alara took a deep breath, adjusted the pack slung over her shoulder, and stepped forward. Pain throbbed with every step, but it was a reminder that she was alive. The forest loomed ahead, vast and unpredictable, but she was no longer alone. And in the shadow of the towering trees, the first chapter of her new life had begun. Alara followed Kale through the dense forest, each step slow and careful. The path was narrow, winding between massive trees with glowing moss that lit the ground in soft green light. Her wound still throbbed, and her muscles ached from the days of running and crawling. Yet with every step, she felt a strange mix of fear and wonder. This alien world was harsh and unforgiving, but with Kale, it felt alive. Kale moved like a shadow. His feet barely made a sound, his body twisting and turning with the precision of someone who belonged to this forest. He did not speak, but his gestures were clear. When he paused, she stopped. When he signaled, she followed. There was an unspoken understanding between them, fragile but growing stronger with each passing moment. After some time, they reached a clearing unlike any Alara had seen. The air felt warmer, softer, almost alive. Towering trees arched over the space, their trunks entwined with glowing vines. Small streams of water ran over smooth stones, creating soft, musical ripples. Birds or bird-like creatures with iridescent feathers flittered overhead, their calls melodic and curious. And then, in the center of the clearing, she saw them. The tribe. At first, Alara could hardly believe her eyes. These people were unlike anyone she had ever known. Their bodies were lean and strong, their skin marked with symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Some carried bows, others spears, and all moved with a grace that suggested they were part of the forest itself. Their eyes were sharp, intelligent, and wary. Every face she saw studied her carefully. She knew immediately that she was an outsider, and that outsiders were not always welcome. Kale gestured for her to stay behind him, as if to protect her from the tribe's scrutiny. He stepped forward, his posture calm but authoritative. A few of the tribe members exchanged low murmurs, their eyes flicking between Kale and her. Alara felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She had never been good at first impressions, especially not with people who might see her as a threat, or worse. One of the elders, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like polished amber, stepped forward. Her gaze pierced Alara, weighing her presence carefully. Alara swallowed hard and straightened as best she could. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric, like a storm about to break. Kale made a low sound and extended a hand toward Alara. Then, using slow gestures, he communicated that she was injured and meant no harm. The elder watched silently, her expression unreadable, and then she motioned for two younger tribe members to approach. They carried a small bundle of herbs and leaves, which they handed to Alara without a word. Alara took the herbs, recognizing them instinctively. They were for cleaning wounds, for calming pain, and for helping her body heal. She nodded her thanks, though the words felt strange on her tongue. She realized that, for now, communication would be mostly through gestures, actions, and shared understanding. Words were secondary. Over the next hours, Kale guided her through the village. It was built in harmony with the forest. Huts suspended in the trees, platforms woven with vines, and bridges of living plants that swayed gently with movement. Technology existed here, but it was subtle. blending seamlessly with nature. Solar panels shaped like leaves captured sunlight, and water channels were carefully designed to irrigate crops without harming the land. She had grown up in human colonies where every structure was rigid and mechanical. Here, life was different. The tribe did not fight against the world, they worked with it. And somehow Kale was their guide, their protector, their bridge between human curiosity and tribal wisdom. The day passed slowly. Elara ate a simple meal of roasted root vegetables and small fruit she had never tasted before. The flavors were strange but satisfying, and she felt her strength returning with each bite. As she ate, she watched the tribe at work, children practicing hunting skills, adults weaving and crafting tools, and elders tending to the plants and animals. It was a rhythm she had never known, a life connected to the land in a way humans often forgot. Despite her growing awe, she could feel the tribe's skepticism. Some stared at her with suspicion, whispering in their language. Kale remained her shield, stepping close whenever someone's gaze lingered too long. She understood that earning their trust would take time. Survival was not enough. She would have to prove herself. That opportunity came sooner than she expected. Late in the afternoon, a scream echoed from the edge of the village. Elara's heart leapt. Kale immediately sprinted toward the sound, motioning for her to follow. She stumbled, but adrenaline pushed her forward. A small child had wandered too close to a cliff's edge and was now struggling to regain footing. The ground beneath the child crumbled, and the risk of falling was imminent. Kale reached for the child, but his arms were not quite long enough. Without thinking, Elara sprinted ahead, grabbed a sturdy vine, and swung it toward the child. With a desperate lunge, she caught the child's hand and pulled him back to safety. The tribe watched in silence, then murmurs spread through the crowd. The elders approached, examining her actions carefully. Kale stood silently beside her, his expression unreadable. Finally, the silver-haired elder spoke, her voice calm but firm. She made a gesture, a hand extended forward, palm up, and looked directly at Elara. The meaning was clear. The child's life was saved by her. The trust had begun. Elara exhaled, relief washing over her. She had proven, in the simplest way, that she could be part of their world. But the realization came with another thought. If she wanted to survive, she could not rely on Kale alone. She had to learn, adapt, and become one of them. In the days that followed, Kale became both teacher and companion. He showed her how to track animals, identify edible plants, and move silently through the forest. She learned to listen to the wind, to read the subtle signs of the environment, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Each lesson was challenging, but Elara's determination drove her forward. She was human, and humans were nothing if not adaptable. Slowly, her bond with Kale grew. He was quiet, often keeping his thoughts to himself, but she began to notice small gestures, the way he checked on her during the night, the way he offered a steady hand when the ground was unstable, the way his eyes softened when she accomplished a difficult task. Words were not necessary. Trust and respect spoke louder. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the village, Elara sat beside Kale at the edge of a platform. Below them, the forest stretched endlessly, alive with movement and sound. She turned to him, unsure how to begin. "You live well here," she said simply. Kale tilted his head, listening. Then he made a low hum and pointed to the forest below, then to her. The meaning was clear. This place was not just home to him. It could be home to her as well. Elara nodded slowly. She realized he was offering more than safety. He was offering a choice. She could cling to the past, to the life she had lost, or she could embrace this new world, learn its ways, and find strength she never knew she had. Over the next weeks, she worked to prove herself further. She assisted in gathering food, helped repair the tree huts after a minor storm, and even began to understand the tribe's language in fragments. Each success strengthened her confidence and cemented her place among them. Yet, despite the small victories, danger was never far. Predators still prowled the edges of the forest, and the memory of the raiders who had destroyed her colony lingered in the back of her mind. Survival required vigilance, and she could not afford to be complacent. One morning, as the mist lifted from the forest floor, Cale brought her to a small river that twisted through the trees. "Drink," he gestured. The water was cold, but pure. She knelt and drank deeply, feeling strength returning to her limbs. Cale watched silently, and for a moment she saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, something she could not name, but something that warmed her heart. Elara realized then that her life was changing in ways she could never have imagined. She was no longer the settler left for dead in a forest she did not understand. She was learning to survive, to adapt, and to thrive in a world that had once seemed hostile and unwelcoming. And alongside her, a silent guardian, a teacher, and perhaps something more, walked beside her. Cale, the mysterious tribal warrior who had saved her life and opened the door to a new beginning. As the sun set and the forest was bathed in the glow of bioluminescent flora, Elara stood tall, her eyes scanning the horizon. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with unknown dangers and challenges, but she was ready. For the first time since the raiders had attacked, she felt hope, not just for survival, but for life itself. And in the quiet of the forest, under the watchful eyes of Cale and the tribe, she began to imagine a future where she truly belonged, a future where humanity, resilience, and courage could carve a place even on the wildest of worlds. The morning mist hung thick over the forest, coating every leaf and branch with a silver sheen. Elara stood at the edge of the village, watching the sunlight filter through the towering trees. She had grown stronger over the past weeks, her muscles taut from learning the tribe's ways. Her wound had healed, leaving only a pale scar across her side, a reminder of the day she had been left for dead. Cale approached silently, as he always did, and stood beside her. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough. Together they surveyed the forest, aware that danger could come from anywhere. Elara had learned to trust his instincts, and his eyes, sharp and alert, seemed to see beyond what her own eyes could catch. The peace of the morning shattered with a distant roar. At first, Elara thought it was a predator, but the sound was different, louder, more mechanical. Her heart pounded as she scanned the horizon. Smoke rose in the distance, twisting above the treetops.
"Raiders! They're back," she whispered, her voice trembling.
Cale nodded once and gestured for her to follow. He sprinted toward the center of the village, where the elders and tribe members were already gathering. The silver-haired elder, her eyes wide with alarm, gestured for everyone to stay calm. Elara noticed the tension in the tribe, but also the controlled discipline. These people knew how to survive and fight better than she ever could have imagined. Cale's hands moved swiftly, signaling to the hunters and warriors. Elara watched as the tribe prepared for the approaching threat. Bowstrings were tightened, spears readied, and traps were checked along the forest paths. She could see the blend of technology and tradition in their preparations. Energy nets hidden among the trees, camouflage barriers, and vines laced with sharpened spikes. Elara's mind raced.
Humans had fought raiders before. Humans had strategy.
She stepped forward, holding her hands up to show she wanted to help. Cale glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but he did not stop her. She turned to the elder. Using the fragments of language she had learned, she spoke carefully. I can help. I know their tactics. We can set traps. We can fight smart? The elder studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Kale's gaze shifted toward her, and she saw a flicker of respect. Perhaps he had already sensed what she could bring to this fight. Over the next hours, Elara worked with Kale and the tribe to prepare defenses. She suggested using the forest itself as a weapon. Branches to block paths, pits camouflaged with leaves, and narrow choke points where the raiders would have no choice but to advance slowly. Kale moved beside her, implementing her plans with precision, his hands steady and sure. Together, they were a force that combined human ingenuity and tribal skill. As the sun reached its peak, the raiders appeared on the horizon. Dust swirled around them as they advanced, a group of humans and machines, armed and relentless. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his face, shouted commands. Elara recognized the type: brutal, arrogant, confident in their superiority. The first wave reached the traps Elara had helped set. Several raiders fell into pits or became entangled in camouflaged vines. Some were caught in energy nets, struggling against the invisible force. The forest erupted in chaos, but the tribe moved like shadows, striking from above and behind. Elara fought alongside them, her hands gripping a spear she had learned to wield with surprising skill. Every move she made was calculated, combining instinct, training, and strategy. She could see Kale ahead of her, his eyes scanning constantly, taking out raiders with precise, fluid motions. But the raiders were numerous and relentless. They adapted quickly, cutting through traps and advancing with heavy weapons. Elara's heart pounded as she ducked under a swinging branch, narrowly avoiding a blaster shot. The smell of smoke and dust filled her lungs, and the cries of battle echoed through the trees. Then she saw him, Kale, struggling against two raiders at once. One had grabbed his arm, trying to pull him down. Without thinking, Elara lunged forward, striking the attacker with the butt of her spear. The raider fell, releasing Kale, who immediately regained his balance and continued the fight. The battle raged for hours. The forest became a living trap, alive with humans and creatures alike. Elara realized that the tribe's strength was not just in their skill, but in their connection to the land. They moved in harmony with the trees, the streams, and the undergrowth, while the raiders moved like intruders, clumsy and predictable. Despite their advantages, the tribe suffered losses. One of the younger warriors, a boy barely older than a child, was caught in a trap meant for the raiders. Kyle rushed to free him, but the boy had been injured badly. Elara ran to help, using her knowledge of herbs and first aid to stabilize him. The elder nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement that her value extended beyond combat. As the sun began to set, the raiders retreated, realizing that the forest and its inhabitants were too dangerous to conquer quickly. Smoke and fire marked their path as they fled, but the damage they had done was clear. Trees had been cut, structures damaged, and several warriors wounded. Kale leaned against a tree, breathing heavily. Elara approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're hurt," she said softly, noticing a deep gash across his side. He shook his head, dismissing it, but the pain was evident in his eyes. Without a word, Elara began tending to him, using the herbs and techniques she had learned from the tribe. She cleaned the wound, applied the healing paste, and wrapped it carefully. Kale winced occasionally, but he did not protest. As night fell, the forest grew quiet, save for the crackle of small fires in the village. The tribe gathered around, tending to their wounded and reinforcing defenses. Elara sat beside Kale, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the battle. "You saved them, and me," Kale finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Elara looked at him, surprised. "We saved each other," she replied. Kale's eyes met hers, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink. The danger, the fear, the exhaustion, all faded into the background. There was only trust, only connection. She realized then that her bond with Kale had grown deeper than she had imagined. He was no longer just a guide or protector. He was her partner in survival, her equal in courage and determination. But even in that quiet moment, Elara knew the danger was not over. The raiders would return, and they would be stronger. They would learn from their mistakes, adapt their tactics, and seek revenge. The forest, no matter how vast or alive, could not protect them forever. She looked around at the tribe, warriors, elders, children, and felt a surge of determination. She had come to this world alone, left for dead, and now she was part of something greater. She had allies, friends, and a purpose. She would not fail them. Over the next days, the tribe worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Elara continued to train with KL, learning advanced hunting techniques, defensive strategies, and even some of the tribe's secret methods of communication. She began to understand their gestures, their signals, and the subtle cues that allowed them to move as one, silent and deadly. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the forest, KL took Elara to a high ridge overlooking the village. The light of the moons bathed the forest in silver, and the village below glowed softly with bioluminescent lights. "This is our home," Kale said, his voice calm but firm. Elara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. This was more than survival. This was life, community, and belonging. She realized that the forest, the tribe, and Kale had given her something she had thought lost forever, a future worth fighting for. But shadows remained on the horizon. The raiders had seen that humanity, cunning and resilient, could not be easily conquered. And they would return, more dangerous than ever. Elara's eyes met Kael's, and without words, they made a silent promise. They would face whatever came next, together. As the forest whispered around them, alive with the sounds of night, Elara felt a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer the settler abandoned and left to die. She was a fighter, a protector, and a part of something greater. Humanity's strength was not in numbers, or weapons, or machines. It was in courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to give up, even in the darkest moments. And as the first stars appeared in the alien sky, Elara knew that the battle for this world was far from over. But for the first time, she believed they could win. Together, human and tribe, strategy and instinct, hope and courage, nothing could break them. The forest was alive, the tribe vigilant, and at her side, Kale waited. The next challenge would come, but they would face it with strength, with skill, and with the unshakable bond that had begun to form between them. Elara clenched her fists, feeling the resolve settle in her bones. She would not fail. She could not. And when the raiders returned, they would discover that humanity, even on an alien world, was a force to be reckoned with. The morning sun rose pale over the forest, spilling golden light over the village. Elara stood at the edge of the platform, her eyes scanning the treetops and undergrowth for any sign of the raiders. Days had passed since the last attack, but she could not relax. Experience had taught her that danger could return when least expected. Kale appeared silently beside her, his movements as fluid as the shadows. He carried a small pack filled with supplies and herbs, and his expression was serious. Elara sensed he had already considered strategies for the next encounter. But she had her own ideas. She had spent the last days studying the terrain, observing the forest, and imagining ways to turn its natural defenses to their advantage. "The raiders will come back," she said quietly. "We can't wait for them to attack. We need a plan, something they won't expect." Kale tilted his head, listening, then gestured for her to follow. They moved through the village, passing children practicing hunting skills and adults repairing huts. The tribe trusted her now, but every action still carried weight. One mistake, one misstep, and that trust could vanish. They reached a hidden grove where a small stream wound through the trees. Elara... She felt the cold water revive her body, clearing her mind. Kale watched her silently, his eyes scanning the forest as always. "Helara," he finally said, his voice low but clear. "The elders trust you. They follow your plans. You must show them a way to end this, not just survive." She nodded, determination hardening inside her. Humans were not just survivors. They were thinkers, inventors, and fighters. If she could combine her knowledge with the tribe's understanding of the forest, they could create an advantage no raider would anticipate. Over the next few days, Elara worked tirelessly. She identified natural choke points, streams that could be redirected, and high vantage points perfect for ambushes. She marked traps and hiding spots, using vines, sharp stones, and even fallen trees to build obstacles. The tribe followed her instructions, impressed with her insight and strategy. Kale worked beside her, his movements precise, his attention focused, silently testing each idea before execution. One evening, while they were setting up a particularly tricky trap along a narrow ridge, Kale stopped and looked at her. "You think like a human?" he said, a faint smile on his lips. "But your plans, they work with the forest, not against it." Elara smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she had not experienced since arriving. "We have to respect the land," she said. "It's not just about fighting. It's about surviving and protecting what we care about." Kale nodded, and for a moment the weight of unspoken feelings hung between them. Then the sound of movement in the underbrush broke the silence. Elara tensed, but Kale's calm posture reassured her. It was only one of the tribe's scouts returning, signaling that all preparations were complete. The next day the raiders came. They moved cautiously, their numbers larger than before. Smoke curled in the distance, and the rumble of machinery announced their advance. But Elara and Kale were ready. Every trap, every obstacle, every hidden vantage point had been tested and perfected. The first wave of raiders stepped into the forest, and chaos erupted. Vines whipped across paths, catching legs and entangling machines. Hidden pits swallowed the heavy boots of unsuspecting attackers. From above, the tribe's hunters struck with bows and spears, moving like shadows through the trees. Elara moved with precision, directing the tribe's efforts and adjusting traps as needed. She shouted warnings, guided warriors, and even engaged in combat herself, her spear finding gaps in enemy defenses. Every moment showcased her ingenuity, her courage, and her ability to think several steps ahead. Kale fought alongside her, covering her back and moving seamlessly through the chaos. His skills were unmatched, but he trusted her judgment, allowing her to lead. Together, they were unstoppable, a perfect balance of human intellect and tribal instinct. Hours passed, and the raiders realized they had underestimated their opponents. Frustration turned to fear as their numbers dwindled. their machines disabled by clever traps and strategic ambushes. Elara's plan was working. Humanity's cunning, combined with tribal skill, had turned the tide. Finally, the raiders retreated, defeated but alive, leaving the forest in silence once more. The tribe cheered, lifting their weapons to the sky, but Elara barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. She looked at Kale, who gave her a small, approving nod. They had done it. Together. After the battle, Elara tended to the wounded, both tribe members and captured raiders who would be spared. The elders approached her, their eyes filled with respect and gratitude. The silver-haired woman placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of acceptance and recognition. Elara had proven herself not just as a fighter, but as a leader, a protector, and a part of the tribe's family. That night, under the glow of the twin moons, Kale and Elara sat at the edge of the village. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and unspoken. Finally, Kale spoke, his voice low. "You saved us. Not just the tribe, but the future. You think like a human, but your heart is strong." Elara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft moonlight. "I didn't do it alone. We did it together." Kale's hand brushed hers, a tentative gesture that carried more meaning than words ever could. Elara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a connection that went beyond trust and survival. It was something deeper, something she had thought lost forever. The following days were filled with rebuilding and preparation. Elara and Kale worked side by side, repairing the village and reinforcing defenses. She continued to learn from the tribe, mastering their techniques while sharing her own knowledge of human ingenuity. She discovered hidden resources in the forest, rare herbs for healing, natural materials for traps, and vantage points perfect for scouting. Every discovery strengthened the tribe and deepened her bond with Kale. Together, they were shaping a future where the tribe could thrive, not just survive. One evening, as they rested after a long day, Kale led Elara to a cliff overlooking the forest. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and the distant sound of a stream. He gestured for her to look, and she saw the forest stretching endlessly, alive and vibrant. "This is our home," Kale said softly. Elara nodded, her heart swelling with determination. "And it's worth protecting." They stood together in silence, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon. The raiders had been defeated, but they knew the danger was not gone. Still, Elara felt a new sense of confidence. She was no longer the settler left for dead. She was a fighter, a thinker, and a part of something greater. Kale's hand found hers again, and she squeezed it, drawing strength from the bond they had formed. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next. The forest was alive, the tribe vigilant, and humanity's ingenuity, her ingenuity, had proven itself. Elara's thoughts drifted to the future. There would be more battles, more tests of courage and skill, but she knew that as long as she and Kale stood together, nothing could break them. They had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, and in that bond she found hope, purpose, and a new life she had never imagined. The forest whispered around them, alive with secrets and possibilities. Elara felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and purpose. She was no longer a survivor clinging to life. She was a part of a world she had helped shape, a world where humanity's resilience and courage had made a difference. And as the moons cast their silver light over the forest, Elara knew that whatever came next, she would face it with Kale by her side. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they had created a future worth fighting for.